But it's also possible that, and I've seen this before, like people will use an old version of OpenSees source code to develop their new elements.
Yeah.
And then they'll like check them in based on something that was like 5 years old. And you know, we don't know if there's this issue or not. So it could have been either we missed it 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, or the code was just based on an old snapshot and then people just upload it.
And so maybe now with this being on GitHub, it's going to be better than it was before. Not being able to download things. Okay.
But so it's still, same thing happened again today, actually, funny, coincidentally. But there was a pull request for this new inertia truss element. And I'm always suspicious when people like upload or do pull requests, add files via upload. It's very no bueno, because it means that they're not, or it's possible that they're not like merging the upstream code with whatever they're working on, right? And that so they have an old snapshot. Maybe this one's probably a few months old, right? But still, you know, OpenSees keeps changing and there's new pull requests in the meantime, right? But if you look at the files they changed, it's basically reverting changes, some stuff I added, you know, within the last week or two. So their pull request is removing this line, which is a line that I just added a week or two ago, and it's removing these lines, which was added. You know, they're adding this, but then they're, you know, like removing these. So it's obvious that they took something from 2 weeks ago, added their element, made it compile, and instead of merging with GitHub, OpenSees GitHub, they're doing a pull request by just uploading that file and kind of leapfrogging, and they're squashing these changes, right?
And so
I rejected it because they need to merge it, right?
Okay, and there's a process.
Maybe not the most polite statement I could put there, but you know, it's
okay. So the way to do it is, let's say I download, you know, from GitHub.
And you create a fork. You clone your fork, but the key is to, and I put a link in there, but you know, this tells how to keep your remote branch up to date with the upstream OpenSees.
Okay. And so what you're saying is I can keep working on mine, but before I submit a pull request, 2 minutes before, not 2 weeks before, I should do this process of merging to make sure that my changes are only on things that I have worked on, not on files that you have changed. And
but if you're doing it through the command line or doing it the right way, GitHub will tell you like, hey, there's changes upstream. You can't do this.
Okay.
So these people, like, they just did a full end around and just said, oh, I don't know if it was intentional or not, or maybe they just didn't know that they had to do this. Yeah, but they just, instead of like merging through the command line or through Git Kraken or Git Bash or whatever, right? They just like uploaded their files as a pull request,
and pretty
bypassing this process.
Right? And their files are all files, or
no, just
files that they've changed. Yeah. Okay.
But I knew something was off because they changed some files that had nothing to do with their pull request.
Interesting. So Beijing, this is a lesson for everybody too, but the point of it is, as we do development, make sure that you don't branch off too far, or at least reconcile.
Yeah, always get the notifications and then do the pull merge with upstream, and always keep it up to date. Right?
Okay.
So but again, you know, GitHub will tell you that it's not up to date, right? But there are ways to get around it, and Frank and I will just reject it if you take the end around. Right? Yeah.
Well, because it's additional work that's inconsistent. So.
Well, yeah, and it like reverts things that we have updated, right? So it's like one step forward and 2 steps back, right? Quoting Bruce Springsteen. Right? Yeah.
What are you going to say, Bijan?
Well, as I understand, so if we have a recommendation or changing on OpenSees, using pull requests, we can present our presentation to the Frank and to the Michael, and they will check my recommend, and if it was okay, they will add, and if it wasn't okay, they rejected. Am I true? Did I understand correctly?
Yeah, like we'll look at it. Like this morning, I saw there was this pull request, right? And I saw like which files they changed. And I looked at this, I was like, whoa, that shouldn't be taken out. That shouldn't be taken out. We just look at the diffs, and if there's anything glaring, we'll say, like, no, we're not going to take it, and we'll try to give an explanation why, right? But if it all looks okay, then we can check out your branch and then compile it and make sure everything runs or whatever, all right, or that it compiles, and we may test it out, all right, and then we can, after we compile your branch, then we can merge it with the upstream. But if there's glaring things like this, we'll just like reject it outright. But yeah. And Frank and I usually meet once a week to go through pull requests.
Just make sure that you send
he's on holiday.
Code.
Yeah.
The key is make sure you send good code.
Yeah.
Don't count on them to debug your code, because then it just becomes a very inefficient use of resource. It's really hard to get Frank to be in meetings, so you want to make sure that you present something good.
And then make sure you provide documentation too. Not as Word files. We're not going to take that. But we'll, like here, Frank's asking that. Sorry about the dog, but that you add documentation to the GitHub OpenSees documentation, right? Is we won't take the pull request if there's no documentation, right? Word files, no bueno. We want it on the GitHub RST format, right? And that's usually a conversation killer, right? Because Frank made this comment, 9 months ago, 8 months ago, and then there's no response, and then so it's still an open pull request, but documentation is always a deal breaker, right?
Yeah, well, because it keeps changing.
Yeah, Luigi.
Yeah. So when you say that they changed things upstream, it means that, for example, in the file where all the elements are added, or I'm not sure what you mean when you say that they changed something upstream.
Like,
they should
well,
have.
what I meant was by upstream, I mean like the main OpenSees repository. So like Frank and I have merged some things in the, so like there's OpenSees, and then like you have your branch or your fork of OpenSees, right? And you always need to keep your branch merged with the upstream OpenSees. So whenever there's changes in the main OpenSees, you just pull those merges down into your fork, right? But I think like if you don't do that, then it'll get things will get out of sync, and you may. But GitHub will, if you're using GitHub the right way, it'll tell you like you can't do a pull request because there's changes upstream. Do a merge, kind of thing.
So if they create an element, they need the CPP and the H file for the element, but then they also need to change the other files.
Oh yeah. I see. Yeah. So they need to So they were changing like this FEM object broker. Like you have to add a few lines of code for your element, your new element in that file, which they did, right? But then they removed this stuff, which was, I know, based on a recent change, right? So they used an old file and then leapfrogged, right? So I mean, they were doing the right things, just with, you know, they just didn't merge with the upstream OpenSees. So all this stuff in pink, right, was kind of in the upstream OpenSees.
Okay.
And their pull request is deleting all this stuff, right? The minus, right, means it's being taken out, which, like, no, we just added it. Like, we don't want to take it back out, right? So, yeah.
So Professor Scott, so if it notifies them to merge it with upstream, then why did they go ahead and proceed to request?
I'm not sure. They may have just not been, and I've seen this before. This is kind of a common thing. I think people are maybe intimidated by GitHub. I certainly am. I mean, it took me a couple of years to figure it out, and I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think sometimes people they may have tried to merge it, and then maybe they got conflicts or something in the files. And instead of resolving the conflicts, they just decided to, you know, take another route and just upload, you know, what they had. And I mean, that's been a problem for many years, even when we were using SVN and CVS before GitHub. Like when people run into conflicts, they just squash it and then just upload their version, which reverts other changes, right? So it could have been a number of things. I mean, there's a lot of ways to use GitHub, but if you're doing it the right way, right, it should, through the command line or through a GitHub application or a Git application, it should be okay.
So do you think, for example, if I'm working on a certain file, do you think it helps to check the latest update so that maybe I work on the latest update and upload the latest update rather than, I don't know, if someone is not proficient with GitHub?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this doesn't happen too often, right? But I mean, it's always a good idea to merge your code with the upstream OpenSees or the main OpenSees. But you know, you should have like a fork. So if you create a fork, and 362 people have done that, right? You know, these are all the different forks where people are using OpenSees and then doing development, and then, you know, you push your branches up to OpenSees. But yeah, so if you're doing any development, you know, you should create a fork. Should probably make a video about how to do that. And then once you have that, Salam, I don't know if you're on when I was showing this link here, but it talks about, you know, how to clone your fork and then how to set the remote upstream so your fork is always in sync with the upstream. And then whenever there's an update, you just do steps 1 and 2, you just do those once, right? And then every time that there's an update in OpenSees, just do git pull upstream master, and then that'll like pull all the latest changes into your fork of OpenSees, so you're always up to date.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Is this with Linux?
Yeah, I was using I use Linux, but you know, there's like get bash is a Windows utility, which is a lot like, makes it very Linuxy. There's also get kraken Git Windows client. There's like a bunch of like different Windows clients for Git, but
Okay.
I usually use Linux, or in Windows I use Git Bash. It's just command line type stuff. But so, oh, Bijan, you have something? Or?
Yeah, there is something. Thank you. If I download the source code of OpenSees on my computer, is there any platform when I want, for example, I want to debug my code? For example, I run my tackle code and search what does the OpenSees do line by line. You know, is there any platform to check the code?
Yeah, I mean, Visual Studio has the debugger, and you can put breakpoints and go line by line through there. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Professor Scott,
yeah.
like when you update something, do we use this update version in our program, or just like how it works? Like there are like so many updates, and we see now on GitHub. So in our executable, we have this updated version, or we don't have, like OpenSees needs to make update.
Yeah. So periodically, Frank will compile the OpenSees.exe with all the updated source code. So it'll kind of lag behind the commits on GitHub, right? And then same with the Python package, like that'll get updated every month or so. And, during that month, it won't have all the latest changes in the GitHub. But if you're compiling it yourself, right, like using Visual Studio or Makefiles in Linux, then when you do a merge, you'll always have the latest code. And you'll have these changes. But if you're using the executable or the pip install OpenSees on Python, it'll lag behind.
So it will do automatically. We don't need to do anything. So it will.
Yeah, eventually all these changes will get into the executables. Okay. Yeah.